Nicole stared at the picture of the happy family they'd once been. Smiling faces stared back at her, mocking her. She experienced a stab of pain when her body was racked by another unexpected sob. But she'd cried all her tears already. She pulled the pillow closer to her chest and sighed heavily, staring blankly at their photo. She remembered the day they'd taken it, before Billy left home. She'd been happy then, with a brother and 2 loving parents. They weren't her real family, but they'd seemed real enough to her. The clock beeped, bringing her back to the present. The meeting would be starting soon, and she had to go. She hadn't contributed much before, but things were different now. She owed it to them to keep their work alive, even if they couldn't. Nicole walked toward the old brick building with determination. This was the first time she'd been back since the accident. Some of the windows were broken and boarded up, and all of them carried layers of dirt, several years old. It didn't look like much from the outside, faring only mildly better on the inside, but it was all the Smithsdale Environmental Society had for the moment. The SES was relatively new, one of her mom and dad's pet projects before their deaths. The SES hadn't done all that much so far, but it had found a good following among the local college students. It gave them the opportunity to get involved in something meaningful. She reached for the door handle and paused, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. She glanced around, but saw nothing unusual. She was probably just paranoid. But once in a while, she had the distinct impression she was being watched. Then again, everyone felt like that sometimes. So she was probably no different to anyone else. With that reassurance in mind, she shrugged it off and opened the door. The musty smell in the interior of the building hit her instantly. She'd forgotten how bad it was. Her parents never paid much attention to keeping up the place. They were always too wrapped up in what they were doing. She needed to talk to John about airing the place out. Nicole concentrated on breathing through her mouth as she looked around. Dim light filtered in through the broken, partially covered windows. There was just enough light to see the dust motes in the air and the cobwebs which lined the windows. The room was large, with a rickety stage at the far end. Between the door and the stage were several rows of rusting fold-up chairs, and she noticed that the chairs were filling fast, with the first 5 rows already full. At least attendance was still up. "Hey, Nicole, good to see you again," a young voice said from behind her. Nicole glanced back at the girl and recognized her as one of the regulars at the SES meetings. She nodded to the girl and turned away. "Sorry about what happened to your parents. If you need anything, just let me know," the girl announced before she walked over to the other side of the room and struck up another conversation. Nicole's throat constricted, and her head throbbed. All too common reactions in the past 2 months. She had to fight it. Couldn't cry here, not in front of so many people. Despite her best efforts, a tear collected at the corner of each eye. She wiped them away, only to find them immediately replaced by more. She had thought she'd completely cried herself out during that week she spent in a catatonic state, curled up on the couch with only a tear-soaked pillow for company. Yet for all the tears she wiped away, she couldn't dry her eyes. Nicole glanced around at everyone, and her desire to avoid crying renewed 100-fold. There had been too many heartfelt condolences and sympathy. No more. She would not cry. Making a quick trip to the bathroom, Nicole splashed some cold water on her face and settled her mind on the business at hand. With her control firmly back in place, she took her seat